A guy didn't want to buy a house, so he went deep into the mountains to build a primitive cabin under a 10,000-ton giant rock. The cabin is not only equipped with drinking water pipes, but also a water filtration system. He even used tree bark to make a soft and bouncy bed and blanket. Grab your phone with about 60% battery left, then put your right foot over your head, and let's enjoy this relaxing process together. After walking in the mountains for 2 days, when he saw this giant rock, he decided to settle down right here, using a machete to clear a space in the chosen spot and chopping down the bamboo on top. This giant rock instantly looked much better. He took out his pickaxe and started the intense digging work. Although the space wasn't big, the soil was mixed with rocks and tree roots, which really added a lot of difficulty to the excavation. It wasn't until the 3rd day that he finally reached the right depth. After leveling the ground, he went to the left side to carve out a few terraced platforms. Because according to Django's plan, the first step was to build a drinking water filtration system. After all, water is the source of life. Using mud and rocks, he built up 3 filtration pools of different sizes. He used wild cement to waterproof the inside, then laid a layer of charcoal at the bottom and put a layer of cobblestones on top. To make it look nicer, he also added a ring of stones around the top. Having self-taught landscape design, he easily made a beautiful wash basin area. With the grooved wood and bamboo tubes, just a simple assembly was needed to get a retro-style wash basin. To reduce the risk of leaking, he applied previously collected tree resin to the joints. The pipe under the basin was sealed tightly with stones. Connecting it to the filtration pipe, Zhangguo carried the bamboo to a higher water source. Splitting the bamboo down the middle and knocking out the internal joints allowed water to flow freely. Just like this, connecting them section by section from top to bottom, going through the dense forest, passing through countless bends on the mountain trail, he finally brought the water back to the cabin. But for a long-term living experience, all this hard work was definitely worth it. Now, this man has achieved the freedom to wash his hands, face, feet, and take a bath anytime. He went to the nearby wholesale market to gather a batch of logs. Because he planned to use a primitive mortise and tenon structure for the build, he drilled holes in the wood and made the corresponding tenons. As time quietly slipped away, Zhangguo finished this work. He dug foundation pits in the ground, and despite getting crushed stones in his eyes, he finally managed to chisel a hole in the ceiling rock. This reminds us that when cleaning or working upwards, you must always wear proper eye protection. Although the foundation posts weren't carbonized, he was smart enough to fill the pits with a lot of charcoal. This also provides a certain anti-corrosion effect. Next was the assembly, just like putting together Legos. Since the top frame lacked support points, he carved a large wooden tenon. To make it sturdier, he used an interlocking tenon method and drove it into the hole in the rock face. After driving wooden pegs to secure the top ring, the top beam was fixed in the same way. At this point, the basic frame of the cabin had taken shape. Now he needs to make a bed and a blanket. Zhangguo is going to make it in a very special way. The bark of this selected big tree is relatively soft. After a flurry of activity, he successfully peeled off 50% of the bark. This way, the big tree can still survive. He carried the bark back. First used an axe to scrape off the rough outer skin, then wrapped it around a log and started beating it. After 998,140 strikes, the fibers of the bark became soft. This step doesn't look hard, but it requires a huge amount of physical strength. The second piece of bark was treated the exact same way. While waiting for it to dry, he shaped logs into square timber and then cut grooves into them. Then, using the primitive mortise and tenon structure, he assembled them into a single bed. Since the cabin didn't have a fireplace yet, he hollowed out a large log to create a simple stove. To make the fire catch quickly, he used a stick to shave off some wood shavings. He whittled a small needle out of bamboo. After drilling a hole at the end, it became a wooden needle. Thread it with hemp rope and it's ready to use. Because Jiang Guo was feeling unwell and couldn't continue the construction, the rest of the work was taken over by his cameraman. Small pieces of bark were laid across the entire bed surface, and then he started sewing them with a needle and thread. Although the cameraman's craftsmanship wasn't as good as Jiang Guo's, he still completed the work very carefully. The finished bark bed is soft and bouncy, feeling just as comfortable as a high-end mattress. Taking a short break, he also needed to take care of his rumbling stomach by preparing some food. Transforming into an avenger to hunt for food, he found some local edible aquatic plants and caught some fresh shrimp and fish in the river. It seems living around here means you never have to worry about going hungry. After prepping the ingredients, the guy actually brought out a Hotpot gadget. Sprinkling some mind-blowing seasonings, he sat in the cabin eating Hotpot and singing. Deep in the mountains, this can be considered quite a luxurious meal. After eating and drinking his fill, the lazy guy, not planning to wash his feet, covered himself with the blanket, ready to drift into sweet dreams. But he tossed and turned, unable to sleep, just like you in bed. A sudden burst of dog barking made him get up to check. Sure enough, he found a little puppy not far away. The little guy looked incredibly cute. "Hurry up, bring it inside." Even though the cabin wasn't finished yet, he fed the dog some warm water. Then one man and one dog cuddled together under the covers and fell asleep. The third ray of morning sunlight woke the sleeping guy. After drinking a hot cup of eagle tea to recharge, he started working on the wooden boards. The cabin, which was still just a frame, needed a large amount of wooden boards. The cameraman used a shadow axe to smooth the wood surface. Not being very familiar with the work, it took him a long time to get this pile of square timber. The next part, cutting the wooden boards, was the real challenge. Even with just a single ag muscle protecting him, the guy sawed from dawn to dusk and only managed to process half of the wood. Oh my God, looking at that big log burned to ashes, did this guy work through the whole night? The cut boards were uneven, so the guy took out a wood plane borrowed from his second aunt and planed the surfaces flat. He brought over some peeled small logs, drilled holes, and fixed them to the sides of the thick pillars. This way, he could directly piece together the wooden boards on the walls. The wooden boards were installed using an overlapping method from bottom to top, splicing them together. During the process, he left an empty space for building the fireplace later. Although the guy had previously only done photography, after spending so much time filming together, he had picked up quite a few wilderness survival building skills. The spliced wooden boards were extremely neat and tidy. You basically couldn't tell he was a rookie. For the parts close to the rock face, to make them fit perfectly, he carefully cut out the corresponding edges. Showing the skills of an all-rounder, he installed a hexagonal window frame on the side. Now only the roof and the front wall were left untreated. He collected some crooked branches nearby and cut the wood according to the spacing of the front wall frame. "Hey bro, are you sure these branches will be sturdy?" The gaps between the crossbeam and the roof were filled with vertically placed wood pieces while leaving some space for light to enter. The roof simply used the most rustic method, laying down wooden boards. I've got to say, it might be because the cameraman wasn't very skilled. In these tricky positions, he could only install them while looking up at the sky. After this whole process, his years of cervical spondylosis actually got a good stretch. After searching around in the forest, he picked a rotting palm tree trunk. This type of tree has a natural structure, being hard on the outside but soft on the inside. Just splitting it into 4 pieces can easily turn them into wooden tiles. tiles. The guy carried the load back to the shelter. The puppy, Erguzi, gave a signal wanting to play. A lump of yellow mud was smeared on the roof. The guy imitated the installation method of old-style roof tiles, laying the wooden tiles one facing up and one facing down, overlapping each other. It seems the cameraman did consider the waterproofing issue after all. My previous doubt was easily slapped in the face. While laying the wooden tiles, you absolutely cannot miss the part right against the rock. After all, this is the place most prone to leaking in the entire cabin. Now he starts building the fireplace. The guy went to a nearby stream and collected a large number of cobblestones. He arranged them in a square shape with an opening and built it upwards. A few hours later, he finally reached the height of the ceiling. He removed the covered tiles on the roof and started narrowing the chimney towards the top. With every circle built upwards, the size of the opening was reduced. So that the floor wouldn't get muddy on rainy days, the guy cut out a large number of square wooden boards. Everything was ready, and he started laying the wooden floor. To elevate the artistic level of the floor, he laid it out in a seemingly random crisscross pattern, laying it all out. Look guys, the final result is really impressive. The bare wall next to the sink really didn't look good. So the guy covered the surface with a ring of slightly larger stones. Although these aren't as pretty as the stones on the sink, it's still better than leaving the wall bare. Such a beautiful, giant rock cabin definitely needs to be paired with a delicate little courtyard. Having self-taught landscape design, he scattered a layer of small pebbles in the middle. It's really amazing. Using the same wooden floor laying technique as inside the house, he finished the ground of the courtyard. Tell me, isn't this way too luxurious?